Welcome to today's Brown Bears podcast. I'm your host, Shoshana Engel-Lewis, Deputy Athletic Director for Governance and Student Services here at Brown. Today's Brown Bears podcast is presented by Rhode Island TF Green Airport, where Easy has arrived and is here to stay. Learn more at pvdairport.com. We have an outstanding group of women here today because we have a special podcast to celebrate National Girls and Women in Sports Day. National Girls and Women in Sports Day is something we celebrate annually, typically held during the first week in February, to acknowledge the accomplishments of female athletes, recognize the influence of sports participation for women and girls, and honor the progress and continuing struggle for equality for women in sports. Essentially, it's a great day to celebrate where we've been, how we got here, and where we're going. This year, National Girls and Women in Sports Day is going to be celebrated on February 2nd, and it's an extra special year to celebrate because we're also honoring the 50th anniversary of Title IX. So let's get started. We have an outstanding group of women here, and I'm going to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves, starting with Coach Mcdonald.
Hi, my name is Keely Mcdonald. I'm the head women's lacrosse coach here at Brown University. I also am a Brown graduate. Graduated in 2000. And after graduation, I went and worked at Northwestern and Princeton and then came back to be the head coach here. And I'm thrilled to be on the podcast with this group.
Great. Thank you. Julia.
My name is Julia Reynolds. I'm currently a senior here where I study economics and history. And I'm on the Brown sailing team where I've been both a captain and commodore. And I was also fortunate enough to be part of the women's team that won nationals back in 2019.
Very impressive, Julia.
Thank you.
And Samantha.
My name is Samantha Chan. I'm a sophomore at Brown right now, and I'm studying medical anthropology, and I'm a first-year fencer on the women's team here. I've been fencing for about 10 years, and I'm from Houston, Texas.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's dive in. I have a question that I'd love for each of you to answer. If you can remember your very first memory in sports, it can be a memory of playing sports or your first exposure to sports. What's the first thing you remember? We'll start with you, Coach.
Cool. The first thing that pops into mind is being on the front lawn. Maybe I'm 5 years old, my sister's 8, and my parents were divorced at that point. So we were at his house for most weekends. And we are running button hooks and slants and just like covering each other for hours outside. And I know the neighbors probably thought, what is this guy doing having these young girls run all these plays? And I remember he would draw them up on his belly and then we'd have to follow the play. But we loved it. And I think it, for me, is that engagement with my family as well as just being outside and doing something where I've been challenged. And my sister is 3 years older, so I was definitely challenged.
Wow. I didn't see that one coming. That's a fantastic memory. I can definitely see that the way you described it. Samantha, what about you?
I think the earliest memory for me was definitely my family going out to our neighborhood park and playing tennis. I actually played tennis for a few years before I started fencing or even really knew what it was. But I just engaging with my family in that way was really fun, but I also learned from the experience that I did not like outdoor sports in Texas because it was so hot and I would just be sweating the entire time.
At least you figured that out early. Yeah. That's great. That's great. How about you, Julia?
I started sailing when I was 8, and the best part of our sailing camps back then were the fun days. So Halloween Day in July was probably my favorite, where you would have to sail around between the buoys or attempt to sail around when you're 8 years old all by yourself to pick up the candy from the instructors. And even though that was very borderline sport at that point and more just bobbing around on the water, is just a great feeling to be alone and totally in charge and be really forging your own path, even if it's only a few feet away to get that candy. But it really is fun, and that has definitely carried me through to now too.
That's great. Thank you. What I love hearing from all of you is how much those memories involve family and fun. I think when we get very competitive, we can oftentimes forget that foundational exposure. Why is sport so important? And hearing that it's grounded in family and fun is fantastic. So I want to build off of that a little bit, Julia. You talked about lessons that you may have learned and things that you picked up along the way. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of the most important things you've learned through participating in sport?
It's being on a team is one of the most valuable things, I think, overall. And in sailing, you start out and a lot of the time you're alone or only with one other person, so it can be very individualized. But when you come into college sports, that totally changes. And I think the camaraderie is unmatched compared to any other type of sailing I've done before or any years, because you're all coming together behind a singular goal to really get better, not for yourself, but for everyone you're around. And I think that carries through to all other aspects of life too, from just interacting with friends on a daily basis to school and work. So that has been really valuable overall.
I love the transferability of that,
Definitely.
of that lesson. So Julia and Samantha, you participate in individual sports for the most part, or small groups, but Coach Mcdonald, you coach a team sport where the experience might be a little bit different. So walk us through maybe what being on a team means, and specifically, through your own experience on girls' teams, or how you've built that, and now how you look at your team and try to coach that.
That's a big question. And what I did hear too is that even being individual sports, there's that team aspect. And yes, though, on the field, we do have to have all 11, 12 people working together. Gosh, I think it means so many different things on different levels. The team aspect, being a part of something, being accountable to something bigger than yourself is so powerful. And what I hope for our student athletes and for all the student athletes is they feel the challenge of that, how hard it is to be accountable to something greater than yourself, and then the meaning and the joy once you really commit to it that comes from it. I feel like the life lessons and the human lessons that we gain by being a part of a team are honestly endless. And I love it that I'm still learning new lessons, even at this point in my career of, okay, how do we handle adversity in a new way, especially as the generations go on. Things we were learning 20 years ago versus now, it's a little bit different. And walking over here to do this podcast on a personal note, I was thinking, I'm sure I'd be asked a question like this. And I was thinking there were days or weeks that I would spend more time with my teammates or my coaches than my family just because of a 3-sport schedule in high school. And so learning to work with other people besides your family and just having that connection was really powerful at a young age. So those are a few things.
No, that's fantastic. Samantha, talk us through or think through, if you will, being a girl growing up and playing sport. Were there ever any times where you either played against boys, or how did that, competitive fuel? I don't know if you have siblings. How did that really grow in you, and what was so special about being a girl that participated in sports?
Yeah. So, the way our fencing practices worked back in Houston was, we'd all kind of come together as a group and fence each other, not really dependent on gender or anything like that. So while we competed based off like our gender and age group and things like that, we practiced as a team, both boys and girls. And I think that's been a really great factor in, especially competition wise. For fencing, every individual fencer is really different, and boys fencing styles definitely differ from girls. But I think fencing, both guys and girls, really made us stronger as a team and even really better friends, because we all knew each other on like a very personal level and saw each other in competitions all the time.
That's great. I think you've just underscored that sport can help transcend those gender roles or what we think or expectations there might be in the differences. I know I grew up the middle child in between 2 boys, and so that was just competition. It never occurred to me that you separate until we started participating in more formal sports and we had to separate. So I love that. So I'm going to go through everyone with this question. I'm going to start with you, Julia. How has sport helped you grow? Not just the skills we talked about, but How has sport or participating at the college level in sports helped you grow as a person?
I think sports are one of those things that are almost always unexpected, be it the conditions that you face, the competition you face, or whatever's thrown at you that day. And I think that is something that helps you in real life as well. You're not going to set classes as much. You don't necessarily know what test is coming up. All you know is that you're going to the race or going to that competition that day, and you have to do your best. So I think that really prepares you to be ready to face whatever comes at you in the world. Be it one day or a month in the future or beyond. And that is something that is very valuable no matter what. So it's definitely a good way to prepare. And even from a young age, you're less sheltered almost in sports, which I think is a very cool thing.
That's fantastic. How about you, Samantha?
I think with individual sports, and I'm sure this is true for team sports as well. I know as a kid, I used to definitely be more shy and not willing to speak up about things. And I think with fencing especially, and my coach has been so supportive in this, has just been like learning to advocate for myself and really push myself in the way that I see could really improve my sport and help my team. And just learning how to like be on a team while also fencing individually and training to, I don't know, just better yourself and carry yourself in like a very professional way has been something I've found really valuable about sports and fencing in general.
Fantastic. Coach Mcdonald.
It's so fun to hear both the unexpected and speaking up for yourself. I love hearing that. Again, it's such a big question, right? There's so many things that I could say. What comes to mind first is that balance as a person for me of between confidence and always having the growth mindset, right? You have to be confident that you are prepared and ready to do anything, and you're not complacent, right? So it's something that we work on as a program, and I work on as a person of I'm ready, I'm prepared for this moment, and there's going to be unexpected things. There's going to be learning. There are going to be challenges. And so being confident yet ready to learn at the same time and walking that fine line between learning and growth. And I'm here, I'm ready, let's do this together.
That's fantastic. I think hearing you all has made me reflect a little bit as well. I did gymnastics growing up, and I think it's that I literally and figuratively fell on my face so much that you just learn to get back up and keep going. And it is very unexpected. That's really special. So Coach Mcdonald, we're going to stick with you on this next question. What progress have you seen for girls and women as you reflect back, from being a student athlete growing up through college to now transitioning to that coach role? What progress has there been for girls and women specifically?
Well, I feel really honored being on this podcast because what's behind us are a lot of the people and the women who have made all of that progress. So I'm looking towards them and thanking them for the people who went before me and before you all to make the progress. Over my time, I think it's, as a young person, I remember like, no, I can do what the boys do. I have 6 brothers. So like, I can do what they do. I'm as good as they are. And felt a bit, I think, that my sports were more of a sideshow to boys sports. And I don't feel like that. I even felt like that as a young coach, that we're kind of always fighting or trying to get the same thing that the men have. I think that's really shifted. I'm excited to see continued shifts, nationally and professionally, especially in pay and equity in pay. And, certainly here at Brown, it does not feel like we're a sideshow anymore to the men's team, and that actually the athletes and the female athletes are so fun and exciting to watch. So I've seen a lot of progress, and I'm excited for that to continue for, specifically our country and certainly worldwide.
Yeah, you mentioned equity in pay, and I think we're seeing a boon of why not when it comes to women's sports? Why not put them on TV? And we're seeing people are tuning in. So I think we all probably were tracking last March, when all of this came to a head, right, with the men's and women's basketball tournaments. And we saw some pretty big differences in what those tournaments offered. And it really pushed this conversation further that maybe in some ways is surprising that Title IX was 49 years old in 2021, and we were still having some of these discussions despite how much progress we've made. But I'd love to hear if any of you had any specific thoughts or feelings, what that made you feel like seeing the pictures between the weight room at the women's tournament and the men's tournament. Samantha, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I felt the most when I first saw those pictures was how blatant it was, and just how it just really seemed like kind of like a slap in the face almost for them to just publicly do that and not think that people would say something about it. And I think that's like maybe a commentary on just sexism in general, and thinking that women will not like kind of advocate for themselves, speak out against things like that. But yeah, I'm sure it felt the same way for a lot of other people, just feeling kind of astounded at how like blatant the differences were between the two teams.
Great.
It's definitely a sense of disbelief when you see those things. As you mentioned, it's been 49 years since Title IX, and yet we're still here seeing some of these issues. And as you mentioned, it's so blatant. So the fact that that is still the way it is with such difference between the two, it's really hard to understand and hard to comprehend how that could still be happening, and leads to a lot of questions such as why and how. And I can only hope that that changes pretty much immediately. You would expect that that can't go on any longer.
Absolutely. I think it's important as we celebrate how far we have come and what women are accomplishing. Coach Mcdonald mentioned the wall behind us, which I encourage everyone to read in detail. It's pretty astounding, the history of women at Brown, and how the history of women in sports at Pembroke and then Brown weaves into the institutional history. It's pretty amazing. But I think it is important to talk about how much progress we have to make and what lies ahead of us. So I appreciate those thoughts. What are some things you think we can do to move forward? And Julia, we'll stick with you on that. How do we continue to push that narrative and make people see how amazing women in sports are?
I think a lot of it goes back down to the roots of women in sports and getting people involved and making them feel comfortable to participate in sports at a young age. I remember when I was younger, slowly but steadily, girls would drop out of my classes and my groups in sailing until essentially I was the only girl out of 10 left. And that really disappoints me. And I hope that in the future, and I've seen that that's been changing. So I think that really having an open and equal playing field for people and for girls to get involved is really, really valuable, because that opens the door for more involvement, participation, and continued involvement in sports for the future.
Wonderful. How about you, Samantha?
I think like just getting women more involved in sports in general really involves equal like resources and media coverage. I think is a huge thing, because I think for me, seeing female athletes do what they do made me feel like I could do that as well. And just seeing female coaches as well, especially in where I'm sure coaching is very male dominated, and it's not quite as relatable for women as it is for men. And I think female coaches are a really big part of that experience.
Great. You touched on something, Samantha, that's really important. And I want to turn this question to Coach Mcdonald. You talked about representation, that if you see it, you know you can be it. And Coach McDonald, who were some of your role models in that space? Did you have any women that you could look up to in sports growing up?
Definitely. I don't know if I would be here. I don't know if I'm that much of a pioneer. I had so many role models. I do what Samantha you're saying about the visibility feels so important. And I can share about my role models as well as just being on TV and being able to be seen as the men are seen on TV. It just does something as you see it over and over. I can do that. Maybe I can do that. Oh, I could definitely do that. Oh, yes, I'm going to do that. So the more you see it, the more you kind of transition along that line. I've had great coaches as a young player, as a high school player, coaches here. Carolyn Norris was my coach here. She's probably on that wall somewhere. And then I have Lisa Miller. She's actually the head coach at UMass. She was a great mentor for me. So I think, and just generally seeing more women playing is just what's key for us to continue moving forward. because it's so fun to watch. And there's so much talent and physicality that I think that's you hit it for me, in terms of what really needs to happen going forward.
That's fantastic. I love hearing the enthusiasm and thought leadership, especially with college age student athletes that are going to be leading us, forward. And it might be through sport, but it might be just leading us generally. And the lessons you learn from your participation in sport will carry you there. I think we have this extra unique opportunity here at Brown because there are so many women in leadership positions at this university. And that is, I can't say statistically how rare or how common that is, but it speaks to Coach Mcdonald, what you were saying, and you too, Samantha, that if you see it, you can be it. And if you don't see it, being the first to get there and push through those barriers and knock down those doors and open them is really remarkable. And I feel, as someone who's relatively new to Brown, seeing women all around us in leadership positions at every level of the university is pretty special. So I want to start wrapping up here with one final question for everyone. And we'll start with you, Coach, and kind of go around to everyone. What is your favorite sports memory? If you had to choose just one,
Goodness.
paint that picture for us, please.
Oh, goodness. All right. The first one that popped into my head, and I'm going to shout out to some of the players who are on the current team, there's so many good ones, but for a Brown memory, being down, we were at Princeton. Everyone knows it's tough to win on the road. We're at Princeton. It's March. It's probably freezing. We mostly play when it's quite cold. Condition. Yeah, it was. I remember the conditions. Our game cards were flying all over. And I had coached at Princeton, and I've never beaten Princeton as a coach on the road, and my team hadn't either. And we were trying out this new defense. Like, all right, they are so good. we got to pull out all the stops. I think it was a box and 3 defense we came up that week. So we did that for the first 15 minutes. That went terribly. We scratched that pretty quickly, but there was a result of that, right? We were down 7. I think it was 9-2. I'm sorry, 9-2 after doing that defense. What I loved is one of our players pulled the defense in and had them all just yell. We switched to a different defense. So she's like, all right, let's just yell, completely clear out that defense. We're bringing in a new defense. She's on the field yelling with her teammates like, we're ready. That's cleared out. And then we go on a run and we win by 1, which in lacrosse, a 7-goal run is quite challenging. And I think we were up by the time it hit halftime. So it was only about 15 minutes for us to get up and then win that game and close out that game. And to see the look of accomplishment and all the fierceness that it took to accomplish that, from practice leading up, the players on the field, the scout players, was a full team effort. And then, it's the sweetness of celebrating in the hotel that night. I think they're all like in the pool and enjoying it. And it's even sweeter because just the amount of work that I see every day that these student athletes put in. So I might even pick a favorite memory that's not sports related, but that sports related memory is just the culmination of so much that it was a real joy to be a part of what they did on the field.
It's pretty special. Did that scream tactic work in future games?
You know what? We haven't used it. We haven't played in a while. So we haven't used it yet. And I'll give her Emily Fryer. She was the one, a captain at the time, I think, led that scream. And but the players remember it. And one of the things they remember is how fast, meaning how fast can you shift your mentality from being down to being up. And so we try to keep that mindset of, okay, things are going a certain way. How fast can you shift and have things going in a different direction? And it just takes the group being on the same page to really buy into that shift. So much, even in just that game.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Samantha, what about you? Do you have a favorite sports memory if you had to boil it down to just one?
So there was a summer nationals, which for fencing is kind of like our big ending tournament for the season. Fencers from all over the country go, if you're qualified and things like that. And we are fencing an event called Division 1A, which is like, you have to have a certain rating, but a lot of people can fence it. And so it was a decently big event. And I remember after the first round, I had just fenced so poorly. It was so bad. And I almost got cut because after the first round, they cut a few people. And so I go up crying to my coach. I'm like, oh my gosh, I fenced so bad. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm fencing horrible. And he was like, it's okay. Calm down. It's just like, this is like Div 1A. It's fun. Just enjoy yourself because there's really no point in doing it if you're not having fun. And I was like, okay. And he calmed me down. And so after that, the first round in fencing, you get matched up with another fencer and you fenced elimination. So if you lose to that person, you're out. I managed to somehow win against like 4 different fencers and make it to the medal round, which is a pretty big deal. It's like top 8 out of the tournament out of like 150 or so. And so what was funny is after I lost, I was like pretty happy with myself, especially considering the first round. But when I was sitting down with the other medalists, I was number 8 and number 7 and 6. I didn't know this at the time. We're going to be my future Brown women's foilist teammates. And we did not know that at the time because we weren't in Brown. We didn't know where we were like going yet. But we talked because we were all sitting next to each other. And we were all from different places, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Texas. But it was really just prophetic of the time because I remember we were having a good time talking even though we didn't really know each other. And then we got to Brown and we all talked about that moment where we all kind of first met each other, really randomly all next to each other. And now we're really great friends. And I just think back and how crazy that was, that moment.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. It was definitely fate or prophetic, as you mentioned. How about you, Julia?
Oh, it's really hard to pick just one.
It was an unfair question, to be fair.
There's so many good ones, but one moment or one day that really sticks out in my mind is when our women's team won nationals in 2019, which we were hosting down in Newport, and I wasn't the last boat on the water to win the final race, but I was on land with the rest of our team, and as soon as that boat got in with 2 of our senior girls, and we had already known the points, it was just such happiness. And as you mentioned, a culmination of all efforts, not just of those 2 people that were on the water to win that final race, but all together as a team. There were probably 20 people that capsized the boat, which is essentially to flip the boat over in celebration, and 20 people jumping in the water, including throwing our coach John Mollicone in. And he still is a little angry about that and claims his boots are still wet from that day 3 years ago.
It was worth it.
I know, exactly. That's what I keep saying. But the just elation and happiness and knowing that the work was all worth it and that it was a team effort. Because even though it was that final point, that final race that really makes the difference, it is overall, it's everyone's effort that's put in each day. And even at the end of practice at 6:30 when it's dark, it's all worth it in the end. And I think that part is really cool and really makes it all worth it overall.
That's great. I'm going to have to remember to ask about these boots.
Yes, definitely.
Whether they've dried out since then. Well, I have to say thank you. And hopefully everyone tuning in at home feels the same way, that we are joined today by 3 super dynamic, fantastic women who've come up in different ways through sport. Sports influenced your life in different ways, but the common thread is that it's had such a positive influence. And I am quite confident that each of you will pay it back, likely in some way through sports. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And I've got to say, I'm thrilled to celebrate National Girls and Women in Sports Day alongside each of the 3 of you and all of our other fantastic student athletes, coaches, alumni, and fans. So thank you so much, and congratulations. Bravo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.